The Empress's blade stopped an inch from Marcus Chen's throat. "You dare present yourself before the celestial throne?" Her voice echoed through the obsidian hall, cold as the void between stars. A human. A farmer. A nobody. Marcus didn't flinch. He had survived worse than an angry woman with a sword, even if that woman commanded 1,000 star systems. "I came to see my daughter." The assembled nobles of the Valkyrie Dominion gasped as one. Whispers slithered through the crystalline columns like venomous serpents. The Empress's violet eyes he remembered as curious and trusting when they first opened in his arms, narrowed dangerously. "I have no father," Empress Lyravel declared, her silver hair cascading over armor that seemed grown from living starlight. "The Valkyrie are born of the cosmic stream. We have no parents in the human sense." "That's not what you said when you were 5 and scared of thunderstorms." Marcus kept his voice steady, though his heart hammered against his ribs. "That's not what you said when you asked me why the other children in town called you a monster." The blade pressed closer. A thin line of blood trickled down his weathered neck. "Speak another word," Lyravel hissed. "And I will. I found an alien baby in a crashed ship. 20 years later she rules the galaxy." Marcus smiled sadly. "That's what the news feeds say about you. About us. But they don't tell the whole story, do they, Lyra?" The Empress's hand trembled. "Just slightly. Just enough. Remove him," she commanded, turning away in a swirl of liquid silver robes. "Place him in the Eastern Tower. I will decide his fate after the coronation ceremony concludes." 2 guards seized Marcus by the arms. He didn't resist. "Your Radiance," one of the nobles stepped forward, his elongated skull adorned with ceremonial gems. "Surely this creature should be executed immediately." "The insult to your divine lineage," I said. "The Eastern Tower, Lord Kethril." Lyravel's voice could have frozen a sun. "Question me again, and you will join him there." As they dragged Marcus through corridors of impossible beauty, walls that sang, floors that rippled like water, he caught one last glimpse of the Empress. She stood rigid on her throne, a statue of perfect authority, but her hands gripped the armrests so tightly that the living metal had begun to crack. The Eastern Tower cell was surprisingly comfortable. A bed that molded to his aging body. A window overlooking an alien garden where flowers bloomed in colors that didn't exist on Earth. Food that tasted like nothing and everything at once. Marcus sat by the window and remembered. The ship had come down in his cornfield during the harvest of 2157. Sarah had been dead 3 years by then. Cancer. The old-fashioned kind that still killed poor people who couldn't afford gene therapy. Their own daughter, Emma, had died with her. The pregnancy complications, they said. Nothing could be done, they said. He had been a hollow man, farming hollow land, waiting for a hollow death. Then the sky had torn open, and fire had fallen, and when he pulled himself from the crater's edge, he found a pod of silver light containing something impossible. A baby. Not human, the skin too pale, almost luminescent. The eyes, when they opened, swirling with galaxies, the tiny fingers ending in delicate points. But a baby nonetheless. Crying. Reaching for him. Needing him. "I should have left you there," he said to the alien moon rising outside his window. "That's what anyone sensible would have done. Called the authorities. Let them take you to some lab." But sense had died with Sarah and Emma. What remained was something rawer. Something that recognized need. He had wrapped the baby in his flannel shirt and carried her home. "The human is lying." Lord Kethral's voice dripped with contempt as he addressed the emergency council. Lyravel sat above them all, her face an unreadable mask. "The Valkyrie are created through the cosmic convergence, as we have been for 10,000 years. This primitive's claims are blasphemy, designed to destabilize your Radiance's rule on the eve of your formal ascension." "Then how?" Lady Mirasol spoke, her tone carefully neutral. "Does he know the location of the crash site?" "The exact coordinates were never released." "Human intelligence networks. How does he know the Empress's childhood name?" Mirasol continued. "The name, Lyra, is not in any official record." Kethral's gemmed skull flushed purple with anger. "The human is a spy. A plant. Perhaps engineered by the consortium to undermine. He carries her genetic marker." Silence crashed through the council chamber like a physical blow. The royal physician stepped forward, her forearms folded in the gesture of absolute certainty. "I took samples when he was processed for detention. The human carries fragments of Valkyrie biological material in his system. Material that could only have been transferred through years of close contact with a developing Valkyrie child." "Impossible," Kethral sputtered. "I do not deal in impossibilities, my lord. I deal in evidence." The physician turned to face the throne. "Your Radiance, this human did raise you, The science is irrefutable. Lyravel sat motionless for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Leave me, all of you. Your radiance, the coronation, will proceed as scheduled. Now leave. They filed out in uncomfortable silence, Lord Kethrol shooting poisonous glances at the physician. Only Lady Mirasol paused at the door. Lyra, she said softly, using the familiar form that only a mother figure could. Whatever you discover about your past does not change who you have become, doesn't it? The Empress's voice cracked, just slightly. What am I, Mira? What have I ever been? Mirasol had no answer. The door sealed behind her. Alone, Empress Lyravel of the Valkyrie Dominion, ruler of 1,200 worlds, commander of the greatest fleet in known space, divine vessel of the cosmic stream, pressed her palms against her eyes and wept like a child afraid of thunder. The door to Marcus's cell opened at the darkest hour of the alien night. He wasn't asleep. Hadn't slept properly in years, not since the men in black suits had come to his farm with their questions, and their warrants and their polite explanations that the asset needed to be returned to its proper custodians. Lyra had been 16 then, old enough to understand what was happening, old enough to fight. Don't let them take me, she had begged, clinging to him as the ships descended. Please, Dad, please. He had tried. God help him, he had tried. But what could one farmer do against the combined might of Earth's government and an alien empire? You came, Marcus said quietly as Lyravel stepped into his cell. She wore no armor now, just simple robes of deep blue. Without the regalia, she looked younger, vulnerable, like the girl he remembered. I came. She kept her distance, arms folded across her chest. To ask you why. Why what? Why any of it? Her voice broke with a frustration that had been building for 4 years. Why did you take me? Why did you raise me? Why did you never tell anyone? And why? She took a shuddering breath. Why did you come here, knowing I could have you killed with a word? Marcus considered the questions. Considered the woman asking them. Saw, beneath the imperial bearing, the confused child who used to ask why the stars looked different from Earth than from her dreams. May I show you something? Lyravel hesitated, then nodded. He reached slowly into his pocket. She tensed, hand moving to a weapon that wasn't there, and pulled out a small, worn photograph. Her name was Emma, he said. My daughter. My human daughter. She died before she was born. Lyravel took the photograph carefully, as if it might shatter. A young woman with dark hair, and Marcus's eyes smiled up at her. The woman's hand rested on a pregnant belly. Sarah, my wife, she had complications. They both. Marcus cleared his throat. It was 3 years before you fell from the sky. 3 years of nothing. Of wanting to die but being too much of a coward to make it happen. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked why I took you. Marcus met her eyes, those impossible galaxy-swirling eyes that had terrified and fascinated a small farming community for 16 years. The answer is simple, Lyra. The answer is that you were crying and reaching for me. And I had so much love in my heart that was going nowhere. Love for a wife and daughter who didn't exist anymore. And there you were, this tiny, impossible thing, needing someone. He shrugged, a gesture that encompassed 20 years of joy and heartbreak and loss. I didn't save you. You saved me. Lyravel stared at him for a long moment. Then she sat down heavily on the edge of his bed, photograph still clutched in her hands. I don't remember the crash, she said quietly. My first memory is yellow, something yellow and warm. The sunrise through your nursery curtains. You used to wake up crying until I moved the crib so the light would hit your face. A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered features. You were the happiest baby at dawn, and the grumpiest at sunset. Drove me crazy trying to figure out the pattern until I realized I was photosynthesizing. Lyravel almost laughed. The Valkyrie absorbed stellar radiation. It was probably the only thing keeping me alive in those early years. Is that what it was? I just thought you really liked the sun. They sat in silence. The alien moon cast silver shadows across the floor. What was I like? Lyravel asked finally. As a child, what do you remember? Marcus leaned back against the wall, decades of memories washing over him. Stubborn, he said. Good Lord, you were stubborn. Once you decided something, that was it. No force in the universe could change your mind. He chuckled. You decided at age 4 that you were going to learn to ride a bicycle. Fell off about 100 times. Scraped up those pretty knees something awful. But you kept getting back on until you got it. I remember the bicycle. Blue with white streamers. You do? I remember. Laravel's brow furrowed. I remember you running behind me, holding the seat, then letting go. And you just kept going. Didn't even notice I'd let go until you reached the end of the driveway. You turned around with the biggest smile I've ever seen on any face, human or otherwise. Marcus's voice grew thick. That's when I knew. Knew what? That you were mine. That whatever you were, wherever you came from, you were my daughter. Not because of blood or biology or any of that. Because of that smile. Because of the way you looked at me like I'd given you the whole universe just by teaching you to ride a damn bicycle. Laravel pressed her lips together hard. Her eyes, those terrible, beautiful eyes, shimmered with moisture that Valkyrie supposedly never shed. They told me you sold me, she said, her voice barely audible. When they came to take me, they said you'd negotiated a price. That you'd been paid handsomely for the livestock. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. And you believe them? I was 16. I was terrified. She stopped. What was I supposed to believe? They had documents. Transfer agreements. Your signature. Forged. All of it. Marcus kept his voice level, though rage burned in his heart. Rage at the faceless bureaucrats who had stolen his daughter and salted the wound with lies. I fought them, Lyra. I fought them for 3 years through every court that would hear me. I spent everything I had on lawyers who told me it was hopeless. I wrote letters to every politician, every news organization, every person with any power who might listen. Then, why did you stop? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Because they threatened to hurt you. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. Some man in a suit showed up at my door. Said if I kept making noise, they'd classify you as a hostile biological entity instead of a diplomatic asset. Do you understand what that means? They would have dissected you to study your threat potential. Laravel went very still. So I stopped. I signed their papers. I took their money I gave away to every charity I could find, because I couldn't stand to look at it. And I went back to my empty farm and my empty life, and I waited. Marcus looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. I waited for you to become powerful enough that they couldn't touch you anymore. And then I came. You waited 20 years. I'd have waited 20,000. The Empress of 1,000 suns set down the photograph of a woman she'd never met. She looked at the old man who had raised her, who had loved her, who had let her go to keep her safe. They're going to expect me to execute you, she said. Lord Kethral and his faction. They see you as a threat to the legitimacy of my rule. Then, execute me. What? If that's what it takes to keep your throne, to protect your people, then do it. Marcus smiled, and there was no fear in it. I didn't come here expecting to walk out alive, Lyra. I came because I needed you to know the truth. The rest, he shrugged. The rest doesn't matter. Laravel stared at him as if seeing him for the first time. You really mean that? Every word. She stood abruptly, pacing to the window where the alien garden bloomed in impossible colors. The Valkyrie don't understand humans, she said. They think your species is primitive because you're young, short-lived, confined to a single world for most of your history. They don't understand what that does to you. How it shapes you. What does it do to us? It makes you burn. Laravel turned to face him, and something ancient moved behind her eyes. Something that had slept for 20 years and was finally waking. The Valkyrie live for millennia. We have time to be patient, to be cautious, to calculate every move across centuries. But humans, you love like you're dying. You fight like you have nothing to lose. You hope against all evidence, all logic, all reason. She crossed the room in 3 quick strides and knelt before him, taking his worn hands in her own. You raised a cosmic being in a farmhouse in Kansas. You taught me to ride a bicycle and make pancakes and sing songs that were ancient before my species discovered fire. And when they took me from you, you didn't forget. You didn't move on. You waited 20 years, and then walked into the heart of an empire that could crush your entire world, just to tell me you love me. Tears streamed down her face, impossible tears, the first a Valkyrie Empress had shed in recorded history. That's not primitive, Father. That's the most powerful thing in the universe. Marcus reached up with trembling fingers and wiped a tear from her cheek. That's all I ever wanted you to understand, he said softly. That love isn't about power or status or living forever. It's about showing up, day after day, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when the person you love rules the galaxy, especially then. He smiled. Someone's got to remind you to eat your vegetables. Laravel laughed. A real laugh, bright and surprised and utterly human. And in that moment, in a prison cell at the edge of known space, an empress and a farmer found something that had been lost for 20 years. They found family. The coronation was set for the following dawn. 1,200 worlds would watch as Laravel formally ascended to the celestial throne, completing a transition of power that had begun with the old emperor's death 3 years prior. The ceremony would broadcast across every major network in known space. Billions of beings would witness the moment when Laravel ceased to be regent and became Empress Absolute. And Lord Kethril intended to destroy it all. Marcus knew something was wrong the moment the guards came for him. Not the same guards who had been bringing his meals. These were different. Harder. Their movements precise in a way that spoke of military training, not ceremonial duty. "The Empress requests your presence at the coronation," one said, his hand resting on a weapon that hummed with contained violence. "You will come with us." Marcus went. But he watched. He listened. He noticed the route they took, not toward the grand hall where he could hear crowds assembling, but down, into the bowels of the palace, where the walls stopped singing and the air grew cold. "This isn't the way to the ceremony," he said. Silence, human. They emerged into a chamber of black stone and dying light. Lord Kethril waited there, his gemmed skull gleaming with satisfaction, surrounded by a dozen soldiers bearing the marks of his house. "The primitive is perceptive," Kethril said. "A pity it won't save him." Marcus felt his hands being bound behind his back. "What is this?" "Justice." Kethril circled him like a predator examining wounded prey. "The Velkari dominion has endured for 10,000 years because we understand that certain contaminants must be eliminated. Your daughter believes she can rule an empire with human weakness in her blood. Today, we will prove her wrong. By killing me? By showing the assembled worlds what becomes of those who pollute our sacred lineage." Kethril's lips curved in something that might have been a smile on a species capable of warmth. "You will confess, human. You will admit that you abducted the Empress as an infant, corrupted her development, and sought to use her as a weapon against the Dominion. Then you will be executed, and Laravel's claim to the throne will be invalidated. She won't believe a forced confession. She won't have a choice. The ceremony will proceed, and when she takes the crown, I will reveal the evidence of her tainted origin. The council will have no option but to remove her and install—" Kethril touched his own chest with false modesty. "A more suitable candidate." Marcus looked at the soldiers, at the weapons, at the cold calculation in Kethril's eyes. He thought about fear, thought about death, thought about a little girl who used to crawl into his bed during thunderstorms because the boom reminded her of something terrible she couldn't name. "No," he said. Kethril's eyes narrowed. "What?" "I said no. I won't confess. Not to lies, not to save my life, not for anything." Marcus straightened his spine, ignoring the pain in his joints, the fear hammering in his chest. "I raised that woman. I watched her take her first steps, speak her first words, lose her first tooth. I held her when she cried and cheered when she succeeded, and loved her through every moment of every day for 16 years. Nothing you do to me will make me say otherwise. You have no idea what I can do to you, human. Sure I do. You can hurt me. You can break me. You can kill me slow or fast or anywhere in between." Marcus met Kethril's gaze without flinching. "But you can't make me betray my daughter. That's the thing about humans, Lord Kethril. We're short-lived and fragile and primitive by your standards. But when we love someone, really love them, there's nothing in all your 1,000 worlds that can make us stop." For a moment, something flickered in Kethril's expression. Not respect. He was too far gone for that. But perhaps a glimmer of understanding. A recognition that he faced something he hadn't anticipated. Then the moment passed, and his face hardened into cruel resolve. "Begin the extraction," he ordered. "If he won't confess willingly, we'll pull the words from his mind directly. The neural shredding will leave him a vegetable, but the confession will be recorded." The soldiers moved forward with devices that pulsed with sickly light. Marcus closed his eyes. "I love you, Lyra," he whispered. "Whatever happens, always." The doors exploded inward. Lady Mirasol stood in the breach, her 4 arms each carrying weapons that burned with righteous fury. Behind her, the royal guard, the real royal guard, loyal to the throne, poured into the chamber like an avenging tide. "Lord Kethril," Mirasol's voice carried the weight of centuries. "You are charged with treason, attempted regicide, and conspiracy against the celestial throne. Stand down." Kethril's soldiers hesitated, looking between their lord and the overwhelming force arraying against them. "This changes nothing," Kethril snarled. "The confession. There will be no confession." A new voice cut through the chaos, sharp as a blade of starlight. "There will only be justice." Laravel stepped through the broken doors, and she was not the cold empress who had held a sword to Marcus's throat. She was something older. Something vast. Something that made even the Valkyrie soldiers fall back in instinctive awe. Her eyes blazed with the light of collapsing stars. Her hair moved as if caught in a solar wind. The very air around her crackled with power that had been dormant for 2 decades, finally unleashed. Did you think I wouldn't know? She advanced on Kethral, each step leaving the floor slightly molten. Did you think you could move against me in my own palace without my awareness? Radiance, you plotted to kill my father. Laravel's voice resonated on frequencies that made bones ache. You plotted to invalidate my rule. You plotted to seize power through murder and manipulation. She stopped inches from his face. Tell me, Kethral, what is the traditional punishment for such crimes? The Lord's composure finally cracked. He fell to his knees, gems clattering against stone. Mercy. Radiance. Mercy. Mercy. Laravel tasted the word like poison. You would have shredded the mind of the only person who ever loved me without condition. You would have erased everything that makes him who he is, just to secure your own ambition. She leaned down until they were eye to eye. Where was your mercy then, Lyra? The soft word cut through the Empress's rage like a knife through silk. Marcus stood shakily, one of the guards supporting him. His wrists were bruised, his face pale from fear and exhaustion. But his eyes were steady. That's enough, Father. This man, I know what he did. I know what he would have done. Marcus limped forward until he could place a hand on her arm, on skin that blazed with cosmic heat but somehow didn't burn him. But this isn't who you are. This isn't who I raised you to be. He was going to kill you. Yes. And you stopped him. That's the part that matters. Marcus looked at Kethral, still cringing on the floor, and felt nothing but pity. He's already lost, Lyra. He's lost his power, his dignity, his future. Anything you do to him now isn't justice. It's just revenge. Perhaps I want revenge. Maybe. But do you want to become the kind of ruler who takes it? Marcus turned her face gently toward him, and the blazing fury in her eyes slowly banked to embers. I taught you better than that, didn't I? Laravel was silent for a long moment. The cosmic power radiating from her skin gradually faded, retreating to wherever it lived when she appeared merely mortal. Yes, she said finally. You did. She stepped back from Kethral and addressed her guards in a voice that was steel wrapped in silk. Take him to the deep cells. A full tribunal will determine his fate. She glanced at Mirasol. And Lady Mirasol? Yes, Radiance, thank you for believing me when I told you something was wrong. Mirasol inclined her head. You are my Empress and my charge. But more than that, she glanced at Marcus with something approaching warmth. You are family. We protect our own. As the soldiers dragged Kethral away, as the chaos began to settle into something like order, Marcus felt his legs finally give out. Laravel caught him before he could fall. Father, I'm all right. Just, old. He laughed weakly. Turns out facing death before breakfast takes a lot out of you. She helped him sit, kneeling beside him in the wreckage of the chamber. For a moment, she wasn't an empress. She was just a daughter, frightened by how close she'd come to losing someone precious. I thought I was too late, she whispered. When Mirasol told me about Kethral's movement, when I realized what he was planning, I've never been so scared in my life. Not even during thunderstorms? She laughed brokenly. Thunderstorms are nothing compared to losing you twice. Marcus pulled her into an embrace, stroking her silver hair the way he used to when she was small and scared and couldn't understand why the universe felt so cold. I'm here, he said. I'm not going anywhere, not unless you want me to, never. Her arms tightened around him. Never again. The coronation hall fell silent as Empress Laravel rose to address the assembled multitudes. 1,200 worlds watched through quantum relays. Billions of beings held their breath. The entire Valkyrie dominion waited to hear what their new ruler would say. What she said changed everything. For 10,000 years, the Valkyrie have ruled through separation. We believed our power came from purity, from the careful maintenance of bloodlines and traditions, from keeping ourselves apart from the younger races we considered beneath our notice. She paused, her galaxy-swirling eyes sweeping across. The gathered nobles, the diplomats, the representatives of 100 species. I stand before you as proof that this belief was wrong. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Lord Kethral's empty seat stood as a silent reminder of what happened to those who challenged this new truth. I was not born in the cosmic convergence. I was not raised in the ancient traditions. I grew up on a small planet at the edge of explored space in a farmhouse that would fit in the corner of this hall. I learned to walk in cornfields. I learned to read from paper books. I learned to love from a human who found me in the wreckage of a ship and chose to raise me as his own. Lyravel extended her hand toward the place of honor where Marcus sat, uncomfortable in formal robes that Lady Mirasol had insisted. Upon this man taught me everything that matters. Not politics or warfare or the management of empires. Those skills I learned from the Valkyrie who guided me after we were separated. He taught me something more fundamental. He taught me that strength without compassion is tyranny. That power without love is hollow. That the measure of any being, any civilization, any empire, is not what it can destroy but what it chooses to protect. She stepped down from the throne, something no Valkyrie ruler had ever done during a coronation, and walked to stand before Marcus. I would like you all to meet my father. The hall erupted. Some gasped in shock. Some muttered in disapproval. But many, more than Marcus would have expected, began to applaud. Your Radiance, one of the senior nobles called out, his voice trembling with a mixture of outrage and uncertainty. This is highly irregular. The coronation protocols are changing, Lyravel said firmly. As of today, the Valkyrie Dominion officially recognizes bonds of choice alongside bonds of blood. Family is not merely an accident of genetics. It is a decision. A commitment. A daily choice to show up for the people who matter. She took Marcus's hands in her own and raised them so all could see. This human, this farmer, this primitive, he walked into the heart of our empire knowing he might die, knowing I might reject him, knowing everything was stacked against him. He did it anyway. Because that's what fathers do. That's what love does. Her voice rang through the hall like a bell. And that is the kind of strength I intend to bring to my reign. She turned back to the throne, pulling Marcus with her. A new era begins today. An era where the Valkyrie reach out instead of drawing back. Where we learn from those we once dismissed. Where we build bridges instead of walls. She ascended the steps, and somehow it seemed right that Marcus ascended beside her. The galaxy is vast and full of wonders. It's time we stop being afraid of them. The crown descended, a living circlet of crystallized starlight that settled onto her brow with the weight of 10,000 years of history. By the power vested in me, by the cosmic stream and the will of the Dominion, the ancient ceremonial voice intoned, I pronounce you Lyravel, Empress Absolute, ruler of the 1,200 worlds, guardian of the celestial order. The crowd erupted in cheers that shook the very foundations of the palace. And beside the greatest throne in known space, wearing borrowed robes and a bewildered expression, a Kansas farmer wept with pride. Later, after the ceremony and the celebrations and the endless parade of well-wishers, they stood together on a private balcony overlooking the imperial gardens. You didn't have to do that, Marcus said. Any of it. You could have kept me hidden, kept the truth quiet. It would have been easier. Easier isn't the same as right. Lyravel leaned against the railing, the crown still glittering on her brow. You taught me that. Among many other things. I taught you to make pancakes. The moral philosophy you picked up somewhere else. She laughed, and it was the same bright sound he remembered from when she was small. Stay, she said suddenly. Not in a cell or a tower. Here. With me. There's a whole wing of the palace that could be yours. Gardens you could tend. I remember how much you loved growing things. And she hesitated, vulnerable in a way empresses weren't supposed to be. I missed you, Dad. Every day for 4 years. I don't want to miss you anymore. Marcus looked out at the alien vista. The 3 moons rising over crystal towers, the ships floating through clouds of luminescent gas, the sheer impossible scope of a civilization that spanned 1,000 stars. I don't know the first thing about being father to an empress, he admitted. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. She took his hand, her grip warm and certain. That's what family does, right? Shows up? Day after day. Even when it's hard, Marcus agreed. Even when it hurts. Even when your daughter rules the galaxy. Lyravel smiled. Not the imperial expression she wore for court, but the real smile, the one that had first appeared on a dusty driveway in Kansas when a little girl learned to ride a bicycle. Especially then, she said. Marcus squeezed her hand and watched the moons rise over a future he'd never dared imagine. 20 years ago, he'd found an alien baby in a crashed ship. He'd chosen to love her, to raise her, to fight for her, to let her go when holding on would have meant her destruction. He'd waited and hoped and finally walked into the heart of an impossible empire armed with nothing but the truth. And now, standing beside his daughter as she took her place among the stars, Marcus Chen understood something that had eluded the Valkyrie for 10,000 years of cosmic wisdom. The universe wasn't conquered by fleets or empires or the accumulation of power. It was conquered by a single human heart, stubborn enough to love. The end.